Hello, 你好. Welcome to Mandarin Mama Chitchat. It is where Trista and Yao Yao, two Taiwanese moms, share intriguing conversations with amazing people from all over the world. We're super excited and grateful to have you here, and really hope you enjoy our chit-chat.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. We are so glad you are here, joining our conversation every week. If you're new, welcome, and I know you will gain a valuable insight from our chit chat. If you haven't, make sure you subscribe to our podcast because every week we will have a new guest. So make sure you subscribe so you'll get a notification when we have a new episode. If you love our podcast, if you think this is going to inspire somebody, make sure you share and leave a review so more people can find out about this podcast and we can build this village together side by side. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to our newsletters. You'll get worksheets and coloring sheets here and there and our latest news. Okay, let's welcome today's guest.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming to our show today. We are super excited. Without further ado, I would like to have Sarah to just kind of introduce herself, share with her stories, and super excited for the chat today.
Me too. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Sarah Vento. I am the Supervisor of World Language and Immersion Education at the APPO School District, which is a district in Delaware. So a small state, but really big and innovative ideas. I'm also a mom of 5, and we speak Spanish at home, and my one daughter went through Spanish immersion. My 2 boys, twins, they are currently in 3rd grade in Chinese immersion. So we have all the languages kind of going on in our house. So I'm really lucky, and I'm happy to speak with you today.
Could you share a little bit more on how it works? I guess how old your kids are and how do you fully immerse them in Spanish at home? And now there's Mandarin Chinese as well in the picture. And just a little bit about yourself, your language learning journey, because obviously you speak at least English and Spanish. Are there any languages you speak? And how did you learn these languages?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So a little bit about my how I was brought up. I was brought up I grew up in New Jersey, and I had a family where my father immigrated here from Peru. So we grew up with the language in the household. My mother is Polish, so we actually had that influence as well. Not so much linguistically, but culturally. And then I lived in an area where it was predominantly Spanish speaking. So there was a lot of diversity, a lot of great things going on. So I kind of had it in my life, my whole life. And then I really started probably studying it in the way we did kind of in the 90s with, grammar and lots of grammar charts and lots of that kind of thing in high school, and went on to study my master's in Spanish, and then did my bachelor's degree, obviously, but I did Spanish as a minor. Went on to go into Spanish as a major. Was lucky enough to be able to travel to Mexico. I taught in Spain, and picked it up along the way. When I met my husband, he works in agriculture, so he was also learning Spanish, and he was great because I was getting my master's degree. He was practicing on the job. And then when we had kids, I was lucky enough to be in world language at the time. I was a Spanish teacher. And we had an opportunity in this state to bring Immersion, the program, to our schools. And we did that. And I remember sitting there as a teacher and watching this great presentation about what immersion education was, and literally had tears in my eyes. And I didn't have children at the time, but I'd never been moved so much about a program or a model or an idea or a pedagogy. So it was really impressive and exciting for me to know that if I ever did have kids, that this was exactly where I was going to put my kids. Fast forward, I've been in education my whole life. Was lucky enough to be in a district where we started the program, and then I took over the program, which was 6 years ago. And I started when my daughter enrolled in kindergarten in Spanish immersion. Saw how great that was watching the connections that she was making with members of my family that spoke Spanish, and it just brought the culture right back to us. Was connected with amazing, amazing teachers, amazing school leaders that believed in it. So just wonderful, like family and village all around. And then when it came time for my sons who were going to school, I just had been so humbled and so impressed, and I just loved the program in Chinese so much that it was just kind of like a natural reaction to be like, let's just do them all. So my sons are in Chinese, my daughter's in Spanish, and it's just been, we share a lot, we laugh a lot. My sons correct us all the time because we don't pronounce things the right way. But what we try to do is just infuse lots of culture in their lives. We make it Chinese and anything Spanish being much easier to access, obviously, but try to just create experiences for them so that it becomes personal and they identify with the culture in a way that I know I do with the Spanish. So, and then we try to do the same thing as a family. So we do everything together. We go to Philadelphia, we go to Chinatown, we go to the Chinese supermarket that just opened in Delaware. It's kind of a big deal. We make sure that we invite and love these teachers that we have because they're just amazing and wonderful. And we celebrate Moon Festival, which is today. So we try to do all those things along the way as well. It's definitely a journey, but it's a happy and a fun one. Yeah, and that's kind of, it's a long story, but that's my story.
Thank you for sharing that. There's so much I want to unpack. But first, I want to ask about the immersion program, the pedagogy, because even though like immersion program schools isn't really a new concept, but I feel like every program does it slightly differently, right? Like kind of half English, half the other target language, or like, 100% full in, and how different subjects are taught in different languages. Could you share, I guess one is like, what moved you? Like, because you said you were like in tears, right? Like what touched you? And then like you feel like, oh, immersion program is such an incredible experience. And then you wanted so much for your own children, even though you didn't have kids at the time. And can you share a little bit about how the immersion program is implemented at your school, and what languages do you guys have?
So in our program, it's a 50-50 model. So it's the half day. I would love it for it to be 90-10, 90 being the language part. But we're 50-50 split. And the Delaware programs, as long as they're affiliated with the state, it's actually the same program in every district in Delaware, more or less. I'm biased, so I think ours is the best. I'm not biased. Our program really is the best. But yeah, we're a 50-50 split. And what that means is starting in kindergarten, that they take half their day in Spanish or Chinese, and then they take the other half in English, but it's not, like the content areas don't overlap. So their math, their science, their Spanish language arts or Chinese language arts, that all happens on the Chinese or Spanish side. And then the English, they do their ELA, they do social studies, and then do some enrichment along the way as well. So, and that's kind of how they blend it out. And so because they work in different content areas, we don't really enroll children in the program after kindergarten. We try to do it as early as possible because they get so far in those content areas that it's hard for them to catch up if they enroll past kindergarten. Even in the winter, we find that the kids are just like, when they get into that classroom after that time, they're just a little bit lost. So it's a pretty rigorous program right from the jump. Our kids are tired when they get home. They're in a little bit of shock the first few days, like, what am I listening to? And what is this? Because the whole entire classroom is, on the language side, is all in everything is in Spanish or Chinese. The English side mirrors that classroom, so they look the same, but the language and everything else is different. And then the teachers work as a team. So that's a little bit about the program. And then what moved me? Everything. I've always really believed in education. Just obviously, I'm a lifelong educator myself. So this is kind of my thing, and this is what helps me breathe and live and be passionate every day about this job because it's a hard one. So I think when you find that thing and you find the people that get you, and for me, it's nerdy language people. So that's fun. I get to like be around them all the time. It's great. But I think what it was for me is it really, it just made a lot of sense for me. And especially at that time, it was right after 9/11. I say I live in New Jersey. I live very close to New York City. The Twin Towers were in my backyard. I could see them from our house. When 9/11 happened, I was in my first year of my master's program, and it was my first day of teaching. I'll never forget it. So I didn't have any teaching experience, but that was my very first day. I'm walking to go teach my university class as like as a master's student, and I remember hearing like what was happening. People were talking about it, and it just leveled me as it did to a lot of people, and especially those that were close and saw it happen. Um, when I saw the program, it just made sense to me. And what I mean is that I thought very clearly, I had a very clear, like very crystal clear thought in my head, and I remember it, that if we were ever going to be any better than that day, it has to be in education. That has to be where we invest our time. And without that, we're just doomed to have this happen over and over again. And that was too defeating to really hear about and to think. So education gave me hope. And then when I saw that we could do it in another language, we could do it in Chinese, we could do it in Spanish, which of course was dear to my heart, it gave me hope in a future that I wanted to have for all kids, especially if I ever had my own. And that's really been it. That's my why. And it was powerful. It's obviously it stayed with me all these years, and I talk about it as often as I can, and especially when times get tough, which they do for educators. It's hard. I remember that. So yeah, that's why, that's what touched me.
That is a powerful why.
Yeah. So when you mentioned like you love education, so I'm a teacher myself too. I'm a Mandarin teacher at high school, and then I was just saying awe and a pleasant surprise that Delaware, because it's a smaller state as well, and has like the Immersion program, assuming it's public school too, right? It's not a private school, right? So like that's because my experience has been, so I went, so in my master degree, I also did teaching as well. Like I taught, I don't know if it's the same, but kind of like a graduate citizenship or something. Basically, it's like my tuition was paid for, but I was teaching like college students Chinese at the time for 2-year like master program. And I just feel like, at least based on my experience, personal experience, the world languages haven't really been the focus or valued in the States. I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, it was, yeah, but just like when you say immersion program, and then just so you love and passion for education, and then just kind of through languages and culture, you can really bridge the gap. Like it brings a lot of compassion, and then it can dissolve a lot of misunderstandings. And that is the power of learning a different language and different culture. And it just kind of sometimes frustrating to me that some people don't see it that way or can really care less about it. But yeah, I just want to share that because I definitely hear you. And then like, I am so excited to have met somebody also who's in the world language teaching position. And then you are obviously on the front end of it. Like, I hope in my state we can bring that as well. I think there are some schools that I know we do have, like I've heard of immersion, like Spanish immersion program. I haven't really like looked into like how it's being implemented and things like that. But yeah. So now I'm gonna shift back to a little bit to how like so you say start in kindergarten, right? Like the program. What made your son wanted to learn Chinese? And then how is he in terms of like, I guess, Spanish at home, Chinese at school, and then, he's also bring the Chinese home as well. And yeah, I'm just like curious to see how all the languages like collab.
So our house is very loud because just in general. So, so there we are talkers. So there is never a dull moment and that goes for my own parents, my own siblings, like my extended family. We're all just very loud people, and we love it, and we love telling stories. So no matter what language you're speaking at the time, just hop on in because we're just going to listen and we're going to make the most of it. But for my sons, I have twin boys, so they're both in the program for Chinese immersion. Like I said, the third grade program. So they didn't necessarily have a choice because I enrolled them in kindergarten, so they weren't they weren't given a choice. I was just because I had been working so closely with that team and had been just so, and I mean this genuinely, just so incredibly humbled and loved working with those teachers. I had no doubt whatsoever that that was the best place for them. And like I said, we try to fill in the Spanish part at home as much as we can for them. But you know, it's every day is a little bit interesting. It takes on, and then I have twin daughters as well. So, and they're 8 months old, so they're not in school yet. But so that's the big question: is like, where are we going to put them? Are they going to go Chinese? Are they going to go Spanish? I mean, it's like an embarrassment of riches, honestly, to me, that I get to even make that choice for them. But at home, they do get into a lot of like, especially between my daughter who's into the Spanish program and my sons who are in Chinese, who of course know more than any of us do, even if we try. What we really do is we try to bring that out in everything when we ask them questions about, hey, what did you do? What did you do in class today? We try to always focus on the language because that is like the minority thing that most people don't really talk about. It's and the kids always want to talk about recess or what they had for lunch. So we try to bring it into focus. And then, like I said, we try to make all of the cultural events and all of the access that we have to language in our own network. We try to keep that really close and we make that a priority in our family. So, for example, like over this, like all of my children take Chinese classes on Sunday mornings. So my daughter, who's in Spanish, she's in that class, and it's and she's in there with my boys who are getting extra practice as well, so that they know that we value the Chinese as much as we do the Spanish. Like I said, the Spanish is more accessible to us because we speak it, and we have a large community of Spanish speakers, and I'm related to them as well. So we have a lot of that influence. But I think just making sure that they know it's a priority to us as parents, and making time to, like I said, go visit Chinatown. And it's not like we're just taking them, we're taking our whole family up there and trying to seek out, shows and experiences. And we tried to make mooncakes. We're not great at it. I have to apologize to people, but but we try to make these a part of our lives as much as we can, and we seek out other parents to help with that. And I'm in a lucky position where I can do that as part of my job even and help other parents connect as well, because it is hard sometimes. It's about, when you have an option to buy a book or buying, if there's one that's in Chinese, I buy it. Not that I think they're in third grade going to read all of, these books, but just the exposure, having it in their rooms, the artwork we choose for their rooms themselves, like the things that we add, just every single piece of their lives that we can kind of manage or ask them about, we put language at the forefront. And that's really it. That's what we can do. And I think as long as we make that a comfortable place for them and they start to identify as, because it's funny, we did an identity quiz with our students a couple of years ago on Immersion, and a lot of them do see themselves as, because they know the language, they see themselves as Chinese or one of the Latin American or Latin X or Hispanic as one of the Spanish speaking countries, depending on maybe the teacher they have at the time. As long as we instill that identity in the kids, that motivation goes up and it becomes more like normal in a sense that, it isn't just this thing that lives in my classroom, but it's a thing that, we prioritize in our house and that we see outside and that we see in our room, and that, and that I can explore because I identify with it personally. And I think that's what we try to think about when we have those opportunities to bring it in and make sure that they're feeling that way. So yeah, so in my program, you'll see these kids that will say like, oh, I'm Chinese. Yes, I'm Chinese. I mean, they're not Chinese, heritage, that's not what they are, but because they're in those classrooms and because our teachers are so wonderful at making that space for them, they do start to identify like that. And I think that's a wonderful way to continue for them to learn and a great place for their motivation to begin.
That is so cool. And I think it incorporate that environment in household, in your home is so important. Like you said, it's just not going to a Chinese class or going to immersion school, and you actually like try to make mooncake, go to Chinatown. So since the boys, they are in third grade, I'm wondering, do they have any pushback? Like, did they ever question you, like, why am I learning Mandarin? I'm not even Chinese, and my sister's learning Spanish. Actually, I'm figuring Spanish might come easier for them because you guys are speaking Spanish majority at home. It might come as easier than learning like so foreign like a Mandarin, right? Did they ever have like pushback or resistance?
Yeah, they're boys and they're in third grade, so they're just they're twins, so they're always trying to find their like identity somewhere. So yeah, they push back on everything. um, but what really is funny is that they've started, I would say like maybe like 2 summers ago, they were like, hey, like why aren't we taking Spanish? And the reason why is because they love Bad Bunny. So honestly, we were playing like I love Bad Bunny too. So we were playing the music all over the place, and they were like really into it. And they're little, so, and I'm thinking this is going over there like a lot of the a lot of the music is fine, but they were asking questions about it, and it was the first time I saw them interested in like a music that was like their own kind of choice a little bit. And so then all of a sudden and it's funny because we have these little gateways that interest kids. It's always interesting what the hook is for them. And every kid's different. But for mine, they were like, oh, we don't know what he's saying. And it was like, oh yeah, no, for me, I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. And they were like, we want to take Spanish. And I'm like, and why are we in the Spanish immersion program? Or why can't we be, why aren't we in the English immersion program? So like non-immersion, they call English immersion. So they think everything is immersion. They don't, so, and that's a part of the answer too, but they were really interested and really started kind of pushing back when they heard Bad Bunny for the first time, which I think is really funny and maybe not the best parenting advice, but whatever the hook is. So yeah, so they do ask that question. Like I said, they have access to people in our house that or in our family that speak Spanish, so we try to encourage that as much as we can, and they listen, and I'll talk to them and I'll read books to them in Spanish, and they'll ask questions about it for sure. We are very lucky in our district that not only in our Chinese immersion programs do we have related arts programs, so they're able to take like band, and they're able to play instruments and take art class and things like that, but we do actually have Spanish as one of those rotating related arts classes. So they do have on a rotating basis, they do have exposure, and they do take Spanish as part of their curriculum in their school. So that's really lucky is that they get to do that. So it's not like they totally don't know anything, but it is funny that the Bad Bunny thing was the hook. So yeah, it's it's interesting, and we'll see how far it goes. But yeah, we'll see. We keep trying to push it in on them too, so they don't have really a choice. And that's part of it as well. Like when they get into kindergarten, and this is true for most of our kids in the program, they didn't have a choice, but they don't know they're in immersion. They just think it's school, which is great. So like they don't, and because they started in kindergarten, and this has been usually they're only like that's when they start real school. They're usually in pre-K, or if they're like being in pre-K. But this is their first kind of go at a full day. They just think it's school. So they don't know they're in Chinese, or they don't know, they don't know that there are kids that maybe are not in that language class, or, so, and that's how my kids are. They didn't push back and say, I don't want to be in immersion. They'll push back and say, I want to be in Spanish, or I want to be in Chinese, or like my daughter wants to be in Chinese, and my kids, so it's that kind of a thing. They don't realize that when they're young, they don't realize so much that it's a different kind of a program. It's just school.
That's so cool. I think one day, maybe when they're in high school, they're gonna realize, oh, there's other choice. I guess well, you don't have to take. I guess high school you have to take. Do you have to take a language in high school, Trista? Like in general, I think you take a language, right?
Yeah, in Delaware we have a 2-year requirement, so they have to have 2 years in high school, level 1, level 2 of a language. So it's a graduation requirement actually here. So yeah.
Is the immersion program K through 12, like all the way to 12? How would that work if you're immersion program already, right? Because you're, for example, I'm in Spanish immersion program. I am like speaking Spanish 50% of the time. Like, I feel like there's a requirement for 2 years or 2 levels, but then like how Yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it might be different by state, but here in Delaware, if for our immersion students, what they do is there's a couple of different restrictions on them a little bit in terms of like when the state will recognize those credits that they have in the language. So our students in immersion take in Spanish immersion, they're ninth graders now is our oldest cohort, and in Chinese immersion they're in seventh grade. So we have a little bit of a staggered start, but how it works is that, and we just did this with our Spanish immersion cohort. They've been taking the STAMP test. Are you guys familiar with that? It's a proficiency-based test for language. So they've been taking parts of that test, but previously we took the APPO test, but we've been taking those two tests since third grade. So they take like just the speaking, and then we add in all the other components of it. When they get into middle school, their proficiency is usually so great that based on their scores, and this is how the state of Delaware works, based on their score on that test, now it being the STAMP test, they earn credits in their middle school to transfer into their high school transcript. So those 2-year requirements are usually done with those by the time they're in seventh grade. So that's good. They also are students, because we do in the middle school, we do social studies, science, and Spanish or Chinese language arts, all in the target language, which is above and beyond what the state of Delaware requires for us to be an immersion program. They just require Spanish language arts and social studies, but we added the science. What we thought we would do is offer the AP test for our seventh graders, because of kind of banking on all the proficiency they've had since kindergarten and on all those content areas. We thought we would offer it to them to see how our kids could do. What we know about the AP exam, which is for 11th and 12th graders typically, but for 13-year-olds, what we thought about for them, what we looked at and considered is that the more exposure they have to a test structured in the AP way, formatted in the AP way, what the research shows us is that the next time they take it, it's much easier. They do much better. So we've had kids actually come out of our program, like going into ninth grade, that have already gotten 4s on an AP. And like, that's no joke. Like that's real. And then not that everything has to be centered around, college credit and what you're going to do when you for a job, because I think what we label as like soft skills, and I say that with all of the sarcasm that my face can muster, because I don't think they're soft skills. I don't think that like empathy and being a good citizen of the world and knowing how to take risks and being able to collaborate with people that are different than you and speak different languages, I don't think that those are soft skills. I feel very strongly that those are skills that every child needs, period. But I think, I think that those things all kind of are very important, but we do try to pay attention to where their competencies are at and where they are with their skills to be able to demonstrate them so they are able to get enough credits. And the way it's structured from middle school on into high school is that they're actually able to get the equivalent of a Spanish minor, like a minor in Spanish, at our universities in the state on their transcript. So they actually walk out of here with basically the equivalent of, like I said, a minor in Spanish or a minor in Chinese by the time they're in high school seniors. So it's a pretty impressive program just by sheer numbers, but we know that that's the way language works in our brain, and we're just trying to make all of the opportunities available for our kids as early as possible. And that's kind of how we're doing things. We're learning a lot along the way, but yeah, that's kind of how the whole program works here.
So can I get a little bit, I guess not technical, but like, so obviously there are standardized tests too, right? When like K through 12, like, standardized tests. How does it work when you have science, social studies, like they're taught in target language, like, Spanish and Chinese? Then when it comes to state standardized tests, how does that work? Because they essentially didn't learn it in English, right?
So this is a great question. It's something that our parents ask a lot about, obviously, because our kids are taught in the language, but they get tested in English. So it's very, very interesting. And I have a lot of thoughts personally about standardized tests. As a parent, I have a lot of thoughts about those, but I won't get into that so much, but here's what we know about how the brain kind of processes language. we know that literacy kind of grows in all areas. So if your input is English, or your input is Chinese, or your input is Spanish, that your literacy and those transfer skills are going to, but essentially you learn any language is going to transfer over into other languages. So we see that gap of those transfers happening in third grade. That's when we see like a big transfer. So that's when our state testing actually begins in third grade. So we try to be very focused on, who our kids, how our kids are doing at that exact juncture, even though they're tested all the time. But we know that it happens then, and we also know that it happens in middle school, like somewhere around 6th grade, 7th grade. So we try to maximize as much as we can out of those 2 years, those 2 different time periods, because we know that the brain is going to be active during those times and be more, it's like a sponge when they're young, it's great. But then we actually have opportunities that we've seen in the brain research for language acquisition. We've seen that it's spongier at other times as well, and everything's kind of firing and all. And if you work with middle school kids, you know that. Like you kind of know that there's something going on. There's a lot of changes happening. From a language perspective, we just try to really hone in on that. And that's why we try to do the AP test. That's where we're trying to like put in that extra science class for them. But yeah, back to the standardized test. What we do see is that on Smarter Balance, which is our like state testing, our kids when you compare them side by side with kids that are not in immersion, and I haven't run the data like the most recent one, so I'm going to have to do that. But our students usually test about 30 points higher on average than their non-immersion peers. So those transfer skills, like that literacy that they're learning it in they're basically getting double doses if you think about it in language. They're getting it in Chinese or Spanish, and they're getting it in ELA every single day. So double doses of the literacy in any language is going to transfer over into just increasing that whole ability to read, write, listen, speak in any language. So when they sit down to take the test, as long as we understand, like, there's going to be some times where that might not always be the case, but that might be the case for any kid. But like I said, the curriculum is very strong. And because we're doing double doses of language in our program, we see those pay off on the tests as well. We have the STAMP test, which tests their ability to speak, listen, write, read in Chinese or in Spanish. And that starts in third grade. And it starts with just speaking in third grade, and then we add in different skills along the way. That's our language assessment. Then obviously I talked about the AP test. We had that as well. So those are the only two like language proficiency tests that we do specifically with our immersion groups. If you go outside of that, then we have a social studies state assessment that's given in 3rd and 8th grade. We have Smarter Balance testing, which is done every year. So it's, it's kind of exhaustive, like the amount of tests that we have. We have MAP testing, which is another growth proficiency thing. Those standardized like state tests, nationally recognized, those are all done in English, and they do cover science. They do cover like literacy and math and things like that. But like I said before, like since the literacy transfers over, our kids are usually outscoring their non-immersion peers by the time they're in 3rd grade. Like I said, when we know that brain is just, kind of like going crazy again, and we're able to take, really make the most out of what the research says. So yeah, I mean, it's either, I don't know, like I said before, like you either understand kind of how the brain works and you're okay with it. And so you kind of ride that ride of like, okay, like I know this is like, a year where we're kind of struggling a little bit, or maybe like, especially in Chinese, like there's a longer wait time for that literacy period just because of the writing system's a little bit different, and it takes a little bit longer for the proficiency to get there when you compare it to like Spanish, for example. But as long as we're aware of that and we respect that, I think it becomes a little bit easier for us to understand where the testing is. Because if they took the test in Chinese, they wouldn't necessarily be there to interpret it in the reading and the written way. Do you know what I mean? So they're not there yet either with that. But our scores don't lie. They do really good. They do a great job. And like I said, it's like when I looked at the last round of data, it's 30 points higher. So our kids are demonstrating that. So that's a real number. So we're really proud of them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the data. And then obviously like all the research based and stuff like that. I feel like people need to hear this, like not no matter your parents or educators, because there's so many I don't say negative, but like kind of like people are like, oh, you learn different languages, you're gonna get held back, or you like, no, that's not the case because like we're adaptable and then it's beneficial. But anyway, just I thank you for sharing like hard data, like that with us. But now I want to shift a little bit to like, so it's Heritage, no, Hispanic Heritage Month going on right now, and Moon Festival as well. But it sounds like you guys celebrate a lot of different cultures and diversity at home. So could you share a little bit about like how you guys celebrating or kind of like any fun family traditions that you guys do or even at schools? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really proud. Our teachers, I can't say enough about our teachers in our program. We do a lot of recruiting from their countries of origin. So we're looking for teachers constantly in Taiwan. We're looking at teachers who are in China. I've learned a ton about what all of that means, and and yeah, and I'm aware. So I've had a lot to learn, but in the midst of all of that, what I've gotten also is just this incredible sense and honestly just this I'm just humbled by the culture and I have so much to learn, but I'm always willing to, and I think and I hope that that comes across. So it's one of the tenets of our program is culture. I mean, it's one of our big C's. We have three big C's, and that's one of them. Because without the culture, what are we learning? What are we doing? So it's really infused into the program in a really cool way. So our buildings are all labeled in Chinese or in Spanish, depending on what program is in there. And then I mean, it's a directive, honestly, that is supported by the state, supported by myself in district office, supported in our schools as well. We have great leaders. So yeah, they do celebrate. Today we're doing Moon Festival in our schools. So our kids have made moon cakes and come home with them, which is amazing. They know the story and where the whole legend comes from, and they talk about that, and that's exciting as well. We have at the end of the school year we do like 5 days of 5 different nights. We have students that do Chinese performances, everything from poetry to opera to singing and speaking. So they're really on display, and every grade level does their own kind of a thing. It's really special. It's awesome. Our parents pack the house and they come and support and bring flowers, and so it's really awesome. Spanish, kind of the same thing. Spanish is a larger program in our district. We're in different schools. Chinese is primarily on one of our campuses, so it's a little bit easier for that group to kind of work together and make those things happen because it's just proximity wise, they're close. But Spanish is the same thing. So we have a Hispanic Heritage Month going on right now. We have a big Spanish festival that we do where we bring in food trucks. We have dancers come in. We have all of our teachers representing their countries. They have little tables set up for kids. We've done like little bingo cards where kids go up and they have to ask certain questions, but it's only in Spanish about, the country or what they've learned. So we've had a lot of success with that. Again, community is great. They all show up. Everybody wants to see their kid, doing the language on a stage or, showing, and we're all here for it, obviously, to support them. And yeah, so this is a great time. We also have, Dia de los Muertos, which is coming up as well. So that's another cultural thing. Chinese New Year is huge in our district. Like even our world language programs, we're in high schools and middle schools celebrate that as well. And we go all out. We have t-shirts made. We do parades. Just red and gold everywhere. I mean, it's really it's a special time. It makes the year fly by because there's so much to celebrate, and the kids just love it so much. And every school kind of does it a little bit differently, but we're here to support whatever they do. And we're always planning and improving for the next year as well. So yeah, we're trying. We do as much as we can to invite the community in to see what we do, because we think it's important. Like I said, going back to prioritizing language, it's super important, but it's also really fun and a great way to connect. So we're always working on that. But yeah, it's a fun time, and we start right like September 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, so we start the year off with a bang, which is fun. So yeah, it's great.
I'm just also very impressed at you mentioned you have 8 months old twins, right?
I know.
And
Crazy.
I'm like, you are saying like you're like a full on, like, like a work, like super motivated, ambitious, like driven in a great way, right? Positive way. And then you also at home, you have 5 children and then not even grown, like 8 months old twins.
Yeah.
Like, do you
She talks like she doesn't have any children and she's doing all of these. She has five.
because I have kids too, like it's 4 and 2, definitely a lot more self-sufficient than 8 months old twins. And I feel like I am just like sleep deprived. And I mean, I don't know, I'm just like super, super impressed. Let me just put it that way.
And I want to say my kids to your school, Sarah. Now, see, I have a question though. Is it lottery based? I know it's a public. It is, right? It is lottery based. That because I live in Houston and we do have a Chinese immersion school, Chinese only, and I know they're lottery based, and it's not easy to get in. Yeah.
Yeah. So ours is similar. We're a choice program, which basically means it's a lottery, which has pluses and minuses. Our Chinese program we have limited spots. We only have 54 spots a year, and we usually fill it up. So we do some immersion nights where we come out and we take the principals with us and we take district people with us and we just talk a lot about what is immersion, what does it look like, how does the day look, for student to be or parents that are considering immersion. After that night that we usually do that presentation, we usually fill the program up pretty quickly and are on a wait list. I would love, love, love to have more Mandarin programs in our district. The demand has been for Spanish. And I mean, I'm saying this, but I realize how much work all goes into this as well. But I mean, it's just been such a popular program and just so great. And like I said, back to the teachers, back to the school's administration. I mean, this is a team effort. They do such a great job, but yeah, it is a lottery system. There are some things like in our district, if they have a sibling that's already been in the program, that kind of bumps them up a little bit. If obviously they have to be in our district to be in the lottery, so that would increase their chances of it. So there are some things that would help, but it is a popular program and the spots do fly. So yeah, it's a choice program. So yeah, I mean it's a little bit. I wish it was more available. I wish the access was there for every kid. I wish that my dream would be like when you enter kindergarten, no matter, what kind of parent you are and what you're doing, that we could come and say, Chinese or Spanish? And that's the question that we should ask at kindergarten registration. That would be wonderful. So that's the vision. That's my vision. But yeah, I think I would love it to be available to everyone and it should be, in all honesty. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess thank you for sharing all of these. And then I'm just, like I said, right, like we were just like super impressed and then all things considered. But I want to ask you one thing as a parent, right? I mean, obviously you are an educator, but as a parent, I don't know if Yaya mentioned something about the resistance, right? Like, so kind of word of encouragement or advice when the kids are pushing back because we're in this States and then obviously English is a mainstream language. For example, myself, I have the challenge of my kids prefer speaking English to me. Like now he understands what I'm saying, but he would no, I don't speak Chinese. I'm American. I live in America. So kind of like if you grew up in a bilingual family, right? Like you spoke Spanish growing up and now you're a parent yourself. How would you word encouragement, right? Like how would you redirect? I know you make the language environment very intentional, which is one thing, taking notes, right? I need to do that as well. But how would you respond to kids who not necessarily want to learn the target language?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And honestly, it depends on, I mean, I have 5 kids. I mean, 2 of them are 8 months old, like I said, so they're not speaking yet. But the ones that can speak definitely have opinions. And I think for me, I try to just kind of get to each one of my kids is very different. So I really try, and I think that's true for every kid. So I really, and I talk to parents about this as well, because parents are, when they hear that their kid is not enjoying the program or the language, or they're having some kind of effect, we actually have a protocol in place that if a parent calls and says, hey, we're having second we're having a lot of doubts about this, and I try to engage them in a conversation that, what's happening at home, what are you seeing? And what we try to figure out is that, are they having a resistance to the language, or are they having a resistance to the content or to the environment, or what is actually like the root of that? And I can tell you from my experience as a parent, it's different for each of my kids. Some of my kids, there have been days where they just haven't had a good day in math, which is in Chinese. So they're frustrated not with Chinese, but they're frustrated with the fact that they didn't really do well in math class today, or they didn't know the answer. And so if you try just to kind of scrape a little bit of those things away and not make it so much like they're associating like the no with the culture or the no with the language, it's very eye-opening. And so what we do in the program is we try to say, stay with it for another 2 weeks. We're going to come up with a plan. We're going to see if we can put some interventions in place or some supports in place for the teacher, for the kid, and make sure that it's not like because it's very rarely like, oh, I don't like Chinese, kid comes to you, so I don't like Chinese, so I want out of the Chinese immersion program or the Spanish program. It's usually something a little bit more than that. So we just try to like think through what that looks like with the kid and the parent to really uncover what the doubt may be. But what I find is that as long as the kids all have their days and they all want to like push back in different ways for different reasons at different ages. So I think like kind of going back to like that whole like house approach, like, so, they're going to go and stomp away and be angry at me and they don't want to speak Spanish to me, but they're going to stomp away to a room that is covered in Spanish posters, Spanish books, like, do you know what I mean? So like, they're glad to have their moment and that's okay. And we can talk about those things as parents. And I want my kids to be able to speak with me about those things. But they are going to have to go through my house, which has all of the artwork and the Frida Kahlo and the, and all, they're going to have to stomp through my house that's covered with all of those things. And we are going to come back and we are going to try to make mooncakes, and they're going to maybe taste awful, but because we screwed it up because we don't know how to do it. But, but because I think we've surrounded them all around on all sides. Yeah, you kind of take, the resistance a little bit, but because it's just part of who we are, they'll come back to it. Like, they'll come back to it in their own way. They came back to it. My kids came back to it through Bad Bunny. I couldn't have anticipated that. So just kind of keeping, I think, the surrounding area and the people that love them and the village that surrounds them with that support and those same priorities really helps when they start to push back, because our friends are, I'm lucky enough to call my teachers my friends. My friends speak Chinese. They're not getting rid of them. So like, okay, you can have your moment, but like, you're not going to get that far, because like over the weekend or coming up, we're going to see that all my friends and your teachers are going to be somewhere else where we're all together. So it's just a part of our life. So it's kind of hard for me to separate it all out. I understand what you're saying, and it is hard, but I've relied on a village, to really get us through those moments. And that's been everything. That's been everything, especially as a mom of 5. That the people we have are just, they mean so much to us.
So do you do the kind of mom language and dad language? Because I know you speak Spanish, right, to your kids. And do you speak like exclusively in Spanish, or like, 'cause a lot of people say, oh, if you want to speak the target language 100%, I'm not sure like where you are, and like, yeah, how does that work in your house?
So like I said before, we actually offer a variety of languages in our district, one of them being American Sign Language, which I'm also humbled and love so much. I took French, so I know French, so ASL, French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese. Those are the languages we offer in the middle school, so starting in 6th grade all the way up to 12th. And being part of being the coordinator of this program and being in charge, I really try to, know as much as I can to at least get me through a little bit of a conversation, even if it's just hi and hello and what my name is. But I would say that like our house is kind of full of all of those languages, if that makes any sense. It doesn't make sense, but it does. I mean, we try to be open to all of it. So my kids have taken American Sign Language before. So at any one time, I'm being completely honest, at any one time, my husband speaks Spanish every day. So we both are Spanish speakers. Sometimes that's the first language that comes out. Sometimes it's English. I'm going to be honest with you, since I learned American Sign Language and I've learned so much, sometimes the actions, and this could be like this could just be me because I tend to talk with my hands a lot anyway, but it makes sometimes American Sign Language and the signs make a lot of sense to me. So sometimes I'll just start, like, I'll use a sign and I won't even realize it. I've been lucky enough to take some classes and I know some teachers that have taught me some things. So for me, I don't really put a lot of restrictions on, like, oh, I must speak Spanish because I'm in the house now, and that's because that's stressful. But my kids know at any one time, and they're the same way, and I encourage this. So I like that they're using all parts of their brain and all the languages that they have access to kind of express themselves. Like, I love that. I think it's great. The translanguaging of it all, I just love. But I don't put a lot of restrictions on it. Like, if you're coming in my house and you haven't washed your hands, you might hear me say it in Spanish. You might hear me say it in English. You might see me make an action for it for American Sign Language or say something in French. Like, these, it's just kind of whatever comes out at the moment. It's kind of how it goes. And yeah, you get some, like, what? Like, what's happening in the South? But like I said, it's fun, and we never feel like the world is too far away. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, nothing's really that, like we're never really taken back by anything in the world because of all of these experiences, and because we've just kind of been humbled and just respect so much of what these cultures and what these people are to us. So yeah, I don't put a lot of rules in it because I want to talk to my kids how I want to talk to my kids, and it's so little time when you're a working mom, as it is anyway, that it just feels very stressful to me. So I just kind of embrace whatever I'm feeling in the moment, and we just kind of go with it. Like, if I think about it, I'd love to speak more Spanish in the house. I'd love to do more sign language in the house. I'd love to speak more French. I'd love to speak all the things more in my house if I had the time. But really, I just want my kids to be open and love all languages. And I think that might take us pretty far in their journeys as well.
I love the flexibility and all the code switching. And then I know it might sound like chaotic from an outsider, but I think it's just fun. And then, like, it's so natural for the kids as well. They're just, like, accustomed to all the, and then, like you say, like, make the brain work, right? Like, do the code switching and then, like, different parts of the brain, things like that. So I love it. So thank you for joining us today with, like, we had a lovely chat. But if people are interested in learning more about your program, like where they can find you, can you share some information, or even just to learn from or to connect? Could you share with us where we can find you in the program?
Yeah, so we're in, I know it's a weird name, but we're APPO School District. So if you just Google APPO School District, APPO School District, I'm pretty sure we're the only one in the whole country. So we pop up. And then we have information about Chinese and Spanish immersion on our website. My email is there. I'm pretty accessible, easy to get a hold of. I'm always willing to talk and communicate and get ideas, just like the two of you, to get ideas. And oh my gosh, like, how can we connect better? And I'm always willing to talk to anybody and help anybody along the journey, because we got to stick together, especially at this time. And I appreciate the opportunity that you have both brought to me to talk about this, because I think it's really important, just like you. I think this is a core priority. I think it's a moral imperative. I genuinely do. I've seen it. I've seen our kids in action. I know what they can do. And I'm just very humbled by the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. So I appreciate it very much, and hope people look me up and connect, and would love the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. You're so inspiring, and thank you for sharing your encouragement, especially you doing all this with 5 kids. So we can do it too. Thank you. All right. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you'll get notification when we have a new episode. And make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. You can go to our show note to find the link. And if you love this episode, make sure you share with a friend and bring them to our community. And if you enjoy our podcast, please make sure you leave a review. Your review will mean so much to us. It will really help me and Trista keep going. All right, see you guys next week. Bye-bye.